For the first Sunday in December, you found the Georgia gang. Topping our agenda this morning, the Democrats on the elections that never end. So sue me, they say. Runoff elections coming up Tuesday across the state of Georgia. And in one metro county, a hiring spree. Some of the stories up for grabs on the Georgia gang.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia gang starts now.
And you only thought the elections were over. Well, they are, except for two runoffs. But nonetheless, the state Democratic Party, not by name, but through a nonprofit group, as expected, has filed a major election lawsuit against the state of Georgia. And Lori Geary is here to lead us off.
That's right, Dick. The group Fair Fight Georgia filed a federal lawsuit this week demanding changes to Georgia's election policies. The group is headed up by Stacey Abrams and members of her gubernatorial campaign who won't let up on the attacks against Governor-elect Brian Kemp.
This lawsuit is going to look broadly at all of the ways our Secretary of Suppression, Brian Kemp, suppressed the vote.
Georgia voters may have spoken and elected Republican Brian Kemp governor, but the group Fair Fight Georgia says not all Georgia voters were heard. Members of the group want a federal judge to order changes to Georgia's election system, alleging many voters, perhaps thousands, had their constitutional rights violated.
My screen froze. It kept jumping back and forth where no one could help me, and they said they couldn't help us, so basically I don't know if my vote was even cast.
The nonprofit group says purges of the voter rolls, the exact match policy, and untrained poll workers led to problems for Georgia voters. They also point to long wait times and aging voting machines. The lawsuit names the interim Secretary of State and the state's Board of Elections as defendants. But in a statement to Fox 5, a spokesperson for the Secretary of State's office said, quote, with a record high of 7 million people on Georgia's voter rolls and unprecedented voter turnout in November's midterm election, it has never been easier to register to vote or make your voice heard at the ballot box in our state. Still, leaders with Fair Fight Georgia say thousands of Georgia voters could not cast ballots.
We need to be focused on the voter, any Georgia citizen who could not vote. And if that's 1 or 100,000, we are going to seek to fix the system.
Brian Kemp's office had no response to the lawsuit, only saying he was focused on meeting with public safety and economic development officials this week as he continues his transition to governor.
Well, thank you, Lori. I've lost track here now. I counted that there were 4 major lawsuits over the election process. I saw a story the other day that there are as many as 7. So we really can't keep track of them all. But let's stay on this lawsuit because it is the major one that Stacey Abrams has been kind of guiding her campaign with for more than 2 years. The whole notion of voter suppression in a variety of ways. Where do you think, Lori, could the most change be affected if the Abrams people were successful?
I think it's looking like the exact match policy, because I was looking back in 2017, Brian Kemp's office settled after a lawsuit was filed on the exact match issue and said that he would no longer use that. However, the legislature codified that into state law. So I think they might have some credence on that exact match issue, and also over the absentee ballot issue and getting them on time to people when they were counted. There are some issues there as well.
And Phil, what do you think? I kind of agree with Lori on exact match. I'm not sure about absentee ballots. Well, I mean, these, by the way, are laws all over the country.
Right. I don't fully agree with Lori on the exact match. I think that's going to be a good argument hashed out in court. Brian Kemp, as Secretary of State, always argues, rightly so, that he was following state law. I think you're right, though, Lori, that it is serious with regard to the absentee ballots. You've got 60 counties that have been accused of sending them out late. Now, that is a serious problem. I always like to remind the viewers, though, that the Secretary of State does not control all 159 counting. Yes, they oversee at the end and certify, but these problems have been going on for years, dating back to when Democrats ran the state, about problems with absentee ballots and with voting and with lines.
And I would also agree with you, it's been going on for years based on race more than party. Since 1868, that's 150 years to be exact, that there have been efforts to repress black voting.
But the good news is it's 2018, and if there's discrimination, you go to court, like we're talking about with these suits.
Yes, you can go to court, but it's after the fact, and so the damage has already been done. And in 2013, they eliminated the Pre-Clearance Act of the Voting Rights Act, which was a great protection for voting rights.
Well, one last point is that the good news is that we all, and I think we all agree on this, we're going to be changing our voting system from these antiquated electronic ballots, and we want to go at some point to a paper ballot with a paper trail. I see a bipartisan agreement on that.
It's funny to hear you say that. Just think what you just said. We're going to go away from these antiquated computer ballots.
That's right.
And we're going to go to paper ballots.
That's right.
Now, Darren, I've got a question for you because you're a grand strategist. Is this strategy of all these lawsuits, some of them, frankly, are ridiculous, and I hope to get to them, is this becoming a parody of a sore loser? Or is this an actual something that a party ought to be concerned with from a good government lens?
Well, I don't think it's actually a sore loser view on this. I think what the Abrams campaign and the people that she's put on, with the lawyers, they basically want to bring to the forefront some of these issues. I think last week on the show,
they're getting paid too.
Well, they are getting paid, and so I think that as a Democrat, but also as a citizen, look, I'm here to say that the election for governor is over. So Brian Kemp is going to be the next governor of Georgia, and I think that what this lawsuit is focusing on is not so much trying to distort his record so much, but to really make sure going forward. I mean, we're going to have presidential preference primaries, coming up in a year. We're going to have a big race in 2020. So if we're here 2 years from now, still talking about some of these systematic issues that we have across the state, that some in some areas, in rural areas and in metro areas, that disproportionately affect minority voters, but also affected some white voters in the suburban areas. If we're still talking about those issues, then this lawsuit will be frivolous. But if this lawsuit is able to bring some of these issues to the forefront, and I agree with Phil and I agree with Lori, I think that while the Secretary of State's office is in charge of overseeing the counties, but we also got to make sure that we're working with the counties. I mean, you look in Gwinnett County, for instance, a county that has 920,000 people, 437 square miles, and only had one early vote location. And so, I think this lawsuit is also going to work with the next Secretary of State to make sure that some of those issues are fixed as well.
I also want to put in, it is the 21st century, as Phil pointed out. Why can't we just vote by the internet? Why can't, if you can log into your banking account?
That's where the Democrats want everything to go, that everybody shows up on election day and votes without ID, without residency establishment.
But you can have security.
States actually allow people to walk in on election day.
And they should be able to. You can have same-day voter registration
in
Colorado.
I was say, we just learned that from Marriott International.
What about hacking?
What about banking? Don't you do online banking?
But you think about how many hacks have happened also.
But they know you when you go to the teller.
They'll know you when you register to vote electronically. They'll
not
know
if you walk in on election day to register.
Well, not doing it that way, but you can pre-register. Don't have to go all the way to same-day voting and registration.
All right, let's talk about the Asian suit in Gwinnett. I love this one. 3 Asian attorneys. I prefer to look at them as 3 American attorneys, by the way.
Yeah.
But they happen to be of Asian American descent. And they claim that people who can't speak English properly or well enough should be allowed to bring interpreters into the ballot box with them. And in fact, the Secretary of State folded on that, the new one, Robin Crittenden, and said, yeah, go ahead and bring the interpreters in. There's a basic question here. If you can't speak English, why should we let you vote?
Oh, come on.
Come on.
Well, that is a requirement of U.S. citizenship.
Exactly.
You have to be proficient in English. So how are these people citizens if they barely know English? Now, there are cases, yes, where you can bring interpreters, and that is federal law. The problem is, who do you bring in to, quote, advise the voter? Is it some left-wing Latino activist or whoever?
Well, the current state law, said that if someone, and I do think that folks who are not able to speak English as their first language should have an interpreter, but it says that if you have a close, if you have a close family member, someone can walk in. But what this just happened this week is basically now saying that as long as this person is not a labor union official or doesn't, is not the person's employer, then they should be able to go in and assist this voter as an interpreter. So I think this is just a 21st century move. I mean, Gwinnett County, Dick, is the most diverse county in the nation.
Fine, let them learn English.
So while you guys,
this is America.
But they are attempting to learn English. But I do think that this was a good step
forward.
Learn
English, then vote.
this is a good step. We can't disenfranchise anyone who wants to go and vote and exercise their right.
There's no problem having some interpreters. Right. It's who is the interpreter.
But this again, and also what we are looking at is that does this Georgia state law violate the Voting Rights Act? And I think that was something that the interim Secretary of State was looking at.
Well, there was a distinction between federal voting and state voting.
But there were only certain people that they were allowed to bring in: close family members, caretakers, or voters that were registered in the same precinct.
Right.
And that's the issue.
Well, we got to get out. We can't get to the other lawsuit I want to discuss, but there'll be other times. When we come back, how about these runoffs Tuesday? They're here again. You get to vote again. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
I know that if you're a good citizen, you feel like you're kind of voted out, that you've spent much of 2018 voting, but guess what? One last opportunity this coming Tuesday. Early voting ended Friday, and Georgia voters will go to the polls, not many of them, I'm afraid, this week, for two runoffs. Lori, we know that there's the race between Brad Raffensperger and Democrat John Barrow for Secretary of State, and then a PSC race, which we can discuss. In the Secretary of State race, obviously, this voter lawsuit that you described is very much front and center, yet the advertising in the race is sort of a rerun of the primary, where Brad Raffensperger is being accused of not paying his taxes, and Raffensperger in turn is accusing Barrow of wanting virtually no voting regulations.
Well, it definitely took a nasty turn, right? But I think, look at the numbers in the early vote turnout. I think Brad Raffensperger is looking pretty good. 86% of the early voter turnout is people 50 years and older. So we know that's a good sign for Brad Raffensperger. 21% are African American.
Right, and
so
generally to win statewide, a Democratic candidate needs about 30 to 31% of the black vote.
And generally Republicans win the runoffs in Georgia if you look back.
Right.
Yeah, but I think that model is an old model, guys. I think that if you just look at both candidates for governor almost got 2 million votes. I mean, Stacey Abrams didn't get 1.9 million votes by just getting African American votes. She got suburban women, she got some Hispanic votes, and then she actually got some of these rural votes. I mean, Phil and I talked about this before. She did well in some rural areas. I think the key for Barrow is that he's really running a sort of campaign that's appealing to a moderate constituency out there. I mean, we know that most voters don't necessarily identify themselves as a Democrat or a Republican. So while the 21% is a little low, I think that on election day, he's got to make sure that number goes up. But the other thing is, let's not forget, Raffensperger skipped out on the debate. So, he, unlike Kemp, I mean, I think his was a little bit more last minute.
You're aware it wasn't to be televised. It was strictly an online debate.
Right, but still, I mean.
Even so, he missed his opportunity to speak to
Well, I think there's a funny twist in this race, too, going over to my old stomping grounds in Augusta.
Yeah, I remember.
Former State Senator Charles Walker spoke out just the other day urging blacks not to vote for John Barrow. He called him a phony. And I think the fact that over in the Augusta area, Richmond County is a big Democrat precinct there, that could hurt Barrow.
So,
but going back to Lori's early voting totals, and I would look at GeorgiaVotes.com. It's a great website to look at the early voting.
They're right, because we're all using them.
We all are using it, and those are good numbers.
He was in the general.
But Theron, to your point, you need the black turnout does need to be higher than 21%. You know that.
Well, I think he'll do better, but also I want to push back on Charles Walker. I mean, a great state senator. Look, I like him. I know his children.
A felon.
No, but he
spent 10 years in federal prison.
Yeah, but I'm a big advocate of second chances and criminal justice reform. Don't we all agree?
I am too. 10 more years.
That's wrong, Dick. But I think that Senator Walker was a little cheap shot to John Barrow. I remember that race vividly. I went to work for John Barrow in 2004 when he ran. We spent an enormous amount of time courting the vote in Richmond County. Senator Charles Walker at the time endorsed him. And let's not forget, this is some personal issue because his son, Champ Walker, ran unsuccessfully. So I thought that was a little bit of a cheap shot by Senator Walker.
That John Barrow double-crossed
John Barrow has actually been a staunch advocate for a lot of issues in the African-American community. I've known him. I'm from Athens. He's a lifetime member of the NAACP, and he's a dean at his church. I'm a deacon at his church. I'm sorry. So I think this whole notion that John Barrow shouldn't get the African-American vote was just really a cheap shot by Senator Walker.
Let me change the subject to the PSC race, because Lindy Miller, the Democrat, is a heavy presence on TV. She has a lot of money, more than I can remember in a runoff for a PSC seat, or any PSC seat, frankly.
Right.
And Chuck Eaton, the incumbent, the Republican, got a huge infusion of cash, Phil, from nuclear groups.
Well, that's right, and obviously the interest of a nuclear group would be in Plant Vogtle, the only facility in the United States that is building 2 new nuclear reactors, as we know. And yes, there's been cost overruns, but Chuck Eaton has wanted to continue, saying rightly so that it would be totally irresponsible to the state of Georgia and its economy if you did pull out of the thing. But I call his opponent Lying Lindy, because she's saying that we have some of the highest electric rates in the country. That is absolutely false. We have among the lowest electric bill rates in this country.
Starting to sound a little like Trump with these sort of, taglines.
You know, it's always good to get an adjective in there. My journalism teacher taught me that.
Well, I do think, though, that she has been very effective with her commercials, because it's been very upbeat and very positive for consumers and lending towards supporting
And she makes
them.
a very subtle play that she's not like the rest of them.
Yes, she
That she's an attractive woman, and there are all these old white guys who are on that commission, right?
No, that's not the
No,
distinction
that's
she's
not the
trying to make.
distinction.
She's basically saying she's not a career politician.
She just shows their pictures.
She's also saying that she has a diverse background in her business community. She actually takes a really offense to that when folks focus on her physical appearance. And at a time when we know this is the year of the woman, that women should not just be, based on their physical appearance. I mean, let's look at their qualifications. But the one thing about this race is so interesting, Dick. Let's just hypothetically say that Democrats are able to win one of these races on Tuesday. I think you will see a tremendous amount of momentum within the party going forward. Now, if they unfortunately you lose, then Republicans have got to feel really good about going forward in this state, and Democrats are going to have to regroup and really figure out how they can be competitive in 2020.
A couple of things for the record as we run out of time here. We got caught between tapings, so we can officially tell you that Rob Woodall was elected to Congress from the 7th District of Georgia, defeating Carolyn Bourdeaux by something under 500 votes. And Phil, while we're focusing on this runoff for the PSC between Lindy Miller and Chuck Eaton, Doug Everett resigned the Public Service Commission right around election time. What's up with that?
You know, as a principal, I do not like that. Doug Everett, if he was going to step down, should have said earlier, I'm going to step down, and that way we could have had an election, and just like we're doing
No
December
argument
4th.
here.
Yeah.
And I thought that was dirty pool.
Now, is he a Republican?
Yes, he
Yes.
is. But I don't care if you're a Democrat.
He's a former
The
Democrat.
Democrat, in fact, he learned that from the
oh,
Democrats.
So that's a disclaimer.
Learned it.
So
He
it
learned
makes
it.
him bad because he was a former.
No, he learned it during his
Isn't
Democratic days.
our current governor and our former governor a former
But your
Democrat?
party used to pull that for decades. I used to see the Democrats do that all the time, and I'm sorry that a Republican is following the Democrats.
Some of our Facebook friends don't think I ever defend Republicans, so I'm going to defend this Republican PSC
you
member
like him
to
for-
basically say, look, we
Gotta
don't
get
know
out.
what he's got going on. He's probably got some
So,
family
to
issues.
heck
some
with the
issues.
electorate is
You
what
know,
you're
so
saying.
so he,
To heck
you know,
with the
so
electorate.
each his own. You know.
Yeah, well,
I don't know.
he learned it all as a Democrat.
Okay,
That's
that's what you're
the-
going to say.
So the Governor Deal and Governor Perdue.
All right,
What do they
when we
learn?
come back, who was behind the hacking scandal at Atlanta City Hall? Stay with us.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
You remember the hacking scandal at Atlanta City Hall that greeted Keisha Lance Bottoms as she became mayor, and the city's computer systems were shut down. Well, now Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General in Washington, announces the arrest, the indictment anyway, of 2 Iranians for committing those grievous hacks. I was struck by the fact that they lost all their dash cam video. I had missed that point. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty severe. And one of the things that kind of got overshadowed is that you got to give Mayor Bottoms a lot of credit. She didn't play this ransom fee that was sort of offered. I mean, it was this huge ransom request from these 2 individuals. And so this is another instance where you see federal government and the city of Atlanta working together to basically bring these criminals to justice. And so, you know, they have really put the city in a very interesting position as far as like continue to try to really get back stable with their entire infrastructure and system, and they're having to spend millions and millions of dollars to make sure that something like this doesn't happen again. So big shout out to the Deputy Attorney General and the City of Atlanta for making sure that these 2 people were brought to justice.
Well, it's kind of out of left field, these 2 Iranians, and then they were able to, they have 200 victims, and it is going to cost the city of Atlanta millions, $17 million to recoup.
Imagine if you were trying to prosecute a criminal case. and the dash cam video is gone. I mean,
well, it was a real blow, and of course we could spend the whole show on cyber attacks that occur, like you just said earlier, all the time. And I will give the mayor credit for not paying the ransom. She wanted to save that money to dole out to other special interests. So.
Oh, come on.
Well, I also think some hidden there.
Well, the thing about bringing them to justice may be open to question too, because they're not here. They're somewhere in Iran or wherever they are, but they're not in the United States, so they may not be brought to justice.
Moving back to Gwinnett County, I'm fascinated there too, because it shows you the effect of the Obama recession, the Great Recession.
What?
The
Bush recession, you mean?
No, the Obama, 8 years of it. Thank you. And now Gwinnett is showing what happens when you pull out of a recession. They've got a $1.8 billion budget. We forget, as Theron mentioned earlier, it is a huge county. It's easy to live in the past and not realize that, but they are hiring almost 100 new police, sheriff's deputies, correctional guards. It's amazing, the hiring spree. They had a hiring fair on Saturday. When do you remember 100 people being sought by a local government?
And they're getting a lot of new revenue because it is one of the still the fastest growing county.
But we saw this a little bit in DeKalb, and we saw it a little bit in Atlanta. I mean, DeKalb County and Atlanta, you know, we talk a lot about them, positive and negative things, but they sort of, I think, show Gwinnett County that this can be done. And big shout out to Gwinnett County because, as again, they're the most diverse county, and they actually have, I got to, you know, take some really extreme measures to deal with the population growth. I mean, it is booming there, and so they got to have enough officers to basically try to reduce the amount of crime that's happening out there.
And presuming, according to that election suit, these new officers will all have to be bilingual or trilingual, right?
That is true. That actually should be something that should be looked at because folks need to be able to speak different languages.
Let's turn back to Fulton County a little bit because I may be the lone voice here, but this is a major story. The state refusing to approve Fulton County's 2017 tax digest. And that has been out there now for a year and a half, almost 2 years. And I believe the state's going to stick to its guns, and Fulton County is going to have to rebill its property taxpayers. Send them another bill.
Another bill, which mostly have already been paid, so it's going to be a real mess.
Yeah, people have already paid their 2017 and 2018 tax bills.
Based on bad assessments in 2017.
And dozens of neighborhoods that the assessing office screwed up. In fact, there's another aspect to this too, that a judge is cautioning Commissioner Lynn Riley, the revenue commissioner, don't try to take away grant money from Fulton County. So that's another wrinkle in this whole mess.
And another wrinkle is the judge is in DeKalb. I don't know how that all fits together. All right, when we come back, we will anoint our winners and losers for this week. We'll be right back.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
And I've got a full plate of those this morning, and I hope my colleagues don't take all my time. So let's begin with Phil.
All right, well, I have to make the loser Stacey Abrams, the defeated Democrat gubernatorial candidate. She made the statement that it was not a free and fair election. You can have problems with the election system, and we all admit that some of our counties do, but to make that blanket statement to the nation and the world is disgraceful. It actually hurts our image, it hurts our economy, so I think that was irresponsible. And I just want to basically say President Trump is a winner for a great trade deal that will affect Georgia and all 50 states. He did a better deal with Canada and Mexico. His critics laughed and said it never could happen. The president of Mexico even gave him a medal for the good negotiator. He is a good negotiator. It was a great art of the deal.
All right, Alexis.
Okay, I'm going to congratulate the Atlanta Business League. Celebrated its 85th anniversary this week, and they gave awards to several business people in that regard, so congratulations to them and Leona Barr Davenport for having that organization continue its good work. And then the AJC inaugurated its first Women of the Year luncheon this week, and they recognized 10 women who were nominated by readers, and they were voted on by a panel of judges, and they were so disparate and inspiring women, so it was a great luncheon. And they also named Michelle Nunn as Woman of the Year for her work with CARE, the organization.
All right, Lori.
My winner is obviously Atlanta United. They are going to the MLS Championship. I'm a season ticket holder, so I'm really excited. And it's here in Atlanta. So on the flip side of that, then, the Georgia High School Association.
Saturday night on Fox, by the way.
Yes, it is, 8 o'clock. But on the flip side of that, though, the Georgia High School Association, the championships, the football championships, cannot be played on the weekend, so they have to go, I think, on a Tuesday and a Wednesday, and that's tough for parents. I'm a mom of an athlete. I love to watch my daughter play sports, my son play sports, so that's tough for parents on a weekdays. And I know that the kids are disappointed, but yet they still get to play in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and that didn't happen last year because of weather.
You're right, absolutely. Okay, Theron.
Definitely wanted to shout out Atlanta United. That's a big win for the city. Wish them well. Also, Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms this week did a Center of Workforce Innovation on the south side of Atlanta. And also, big shout out to Wells Fargo for giving $200,000 for homelessness in the city of Atlanta. My next winner is going to be all of the many Georgians who speak English as well as second and third languages. I'm really happy that they will have their right to vote and it will be protected. Also want to give a big shout out to Charles Bullock down in UGA, professor, one of, I think, the best political sciences professors in the country. He's celebrating 50 years at UGA, so they had a really wonderful event for him at Ansley this week, celebrating him. And then lastly, want to make Vanessa Harrison, who is going to be the new state president for AT&T. Going to welcome her to the city.
All right, I will echo you on Chuck Bullock. He is a darn good, he's a good resource for all of us.
We all agree.
Yes, we do.
And I will second it on Atlanta United as well. But hey, let's not forget, Brian McCann is back with the Atlanta Braves. That'll be fun to see him back in a Braves uniform. And at Georgia Tech, a little sadness because Paul Johnson and his option offense have retired. I think he retired. Anyway, we'll see you next week on the Georgia Gang.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.